All right, so we can get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Maddie. As a visual description, I'm a white person with clear glasses, wearing a beige shirt with blonde hair, and I will be the presentations facilitator for today. We are here to do a presentation titled How to Use Supported Decision Making in Florida, also called SDM. Today, we're going to have a presenter from Disability Rights Florida's staff and two guest speakers. First, we're going to get started with a few accessibility considerations. Caption options in ASL. If you need closed captions, there is a button at the bottom of your screen that says CC, the letter CC. You can click that and your captions will show on your screen. Additionally, you can use an external caption viewer. We've provided a link in the chat of this Zoom call where you can click that link and it will open the captions in a different tab. Finally, we have ASL interpreters who are spotlighted on your screen. You should see them in the video option on your screen right now. If you have any issues accessing any of these accessibility things, please send us a message or send us a message at the email on this screen, webinar@disabilityrightsflorida.org. For submitting questions and some information about the recording of this webinar, we have a Q&A button at the bottom of this screen. So if you have questions throughout the webinar about the topic or you want to have something clarified at the end, you can submit a question through the Q&A function. It is likely that we won't get to answering many of the questions until later. So just know that you can ask questions as you go, but we'll probably get to them only at the end. One note about recording, this webinar will be recorded and posted on our website, on our YouTube channel, and shared through our social media and e-newsletter. So be on the lookout for that in about a week or so. All right, so as far as introductions go, we have three wonderful speakers today. First, we have Morgan Patipa, who is an advocate investigator at Disability Rights Florida. Carla Herrera, who is a supported decision-making user and an apprentice baker. And Carla's mom and supporter, Yolanda, who's also a wonderful disability advocate throughout the state of Florida. So to get started, we have a brief agenda of the different things we're going to discuss today. First, we're going to cover what supported decision-making is. Next, we're going to talk about presuming or assuming someone's competence. Third, we're going to talk about the dignity of risk and the ability to make risk choices and decisions. Then we're going to talk about why use supported decision-making and how to use it. Next, we're going to talk about Florida's new supported decision-making law that was passed this year. Then we're going to cover protections for decision makers. Then we're going to hear from Carla and Yolanda about their experience using supported decision-making. And lastly, we'll have time for some questions from the audience participants and some final closing thoughts. So without further ado, we're going to do one quick poll question and then we'll pass it over to Morgan. So I'll read the poll question aloud. It should pop up on your screen right now. So the first question here is, what kind of decision or decisions have you made using the advice of someone else? And this is multiple choice, so you can click multiple. Buying a car, renting or buying an apartment or a house, trying a new haircut or style, and where you might go for dinner tonight. So we'll leave that poll question up for a few more moments, and we'll see what folks say. All right, nearly 2/3 of our participants have filled out the poll, so I'll read some of the takeaways. 80 out of 96 participants, 83% of people said they get support or advice when they need to buy a car. 73% say that they get advice from a trusted person in their life when renting or buying an apartment. 58 ask for advice if they should try a new haircut or style. And 75% of people make a decision with someone else about where they might go for dinner tonight. So this is just a brief kind of introductory question into some of the things we're going to talk about today. So I will now pass it over to Morgan, and we will get started.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Morgan Petipa. As Maddie mentioned, I'm an advocate investigator here with Disability Rights Florida on the Community and Healthcare Services team. I also serve as the individual that is primarily responsible for drafting supported decision-making agreements at the agency. So we're going to talk about what is supported decision-making, right? Okay, a little bit first about Disability Rights Florida. We are the designated protection and advocacy agency for the state of Florida, and our mission, as you can see on the screen, is to advocate, educate, investigate, and litigate to protect and advance the rights, dignity, equal opportunity, self-determination, and choices for all people with disabilities. We are funded under 9 federal grants, and we do have access authority to any agency, institution, and organization that serves or houses people with disabilities. And this is a power that other agencies do not have, which is pretty unique. Next slide, please. Okay, so what you're all here for, right? What is supported decision-making? So supported decision-making is a legally recognized alternative to guardianship and guardian advocacy. And what I really like to focus on is the fact that it is legally recognized. It was signed into law recently in 2024. I believe it was in June. And so it is now a legally recognized alternative to guardianship. But in layman's terms, SDM, or supported decision making, but I will refer to it as SDM for the remainder of this presentation, is a collaborative process between the decision maker and their supporters. And I will define decision maker and supporters as we get down here, get down the slide here. So the decision maker is the individual with the disability, right? And their supporters are trusted people that they can rely on to help the individual with a disability make decisions and understand the consequences of those decisions. So go ahead, next slide, please. Okay, so we'll talk about the role of the supporter. And to be honest with you, this is the slide that I often get the most questions about. So I'm going to spend a considerable amount of time here so that we can really understand what the role of the supporter is and what they do. So a supporter does not make decisions for the individual with a disability. And that is one of the most important points of this entire presentation. They do not make decisions for the individual with a disability. Instead, they are there to assist the decision maker or the individual with a disability in making decisions, right? So this can be in the form of answering questions, conveying the individual's decision to another person, right? Say if they use an AAC device or some other communication device and they're unable to communicate in a verbal way, they can do that, and understanding the meaning and significance of a decision. So I think this third bullet point here is the most important out of all three because it allows the individual with a disability to understand the impact of the decision that they're making, right? Next slide, please. Okay, so this is probably my favorite slide in this entire presentation because we're talking about presuming competence, right? Presuming competence of individuals with disabilities. So legally, every person is presumed competent unless a court of law deems that they are not. Okay, so right off the bat, we're all presumed competent unless a court says, no, you're not, right? But unfortunately, many people assume that all people with disabilities are unable to make their own decisions, which is unfortunate because, like I just said in the previous point, unless a court deems that you're not competent, legally you are considered competent. However, there is a societal bias towards, I would gander to say that there is a societal trend towards, uh, uh, towards not presuming competence of people with disabilities, which is truly unfortunate, right? SDM, however, is based on the principle that we flip the script of society, right? That bias that I was just talking about, and presume that individuals with disabilities are competent to make their own decisions. So it's really sort of flipping the script and trending the other way, if you will. So there's no requirement that a person make only good decisions, right? We all make decisions and sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not, right? There's no requirement that a person make only good decisions, just that they're able to make decisions, period, right? So as long as you can make a decision, that's all you need, right? And needing extra time or explanation does not mean a person cannot make their own decisions. So if I need an accommodation to be able to make a decision, that doesn't mean I can't make my own decision. It just means I need it to be accommodated and to be explained in a different way or to be conveyed in a different way. And that's okay. I'm still able to make my own decision. So allows us to understand that people with disabilities can make choices to the extent that they are able, even if it looks different, quote unquote, than what you might have imagined, right? So the point here is that people with disabilities can make decisions. It just may be in a different way or in a different manner, but that's okay. Next slide, please.
We're actually going to pause and do another poll question here. So this is Maddie speaking. The support decision-making question says, have you ever made a bad choice? And it's a yes or a no answer. And so far, 99% of the participants have said, yes, they have made a bad choice. And this is exactly what Morgan is going to talk a bit more about in the next slide. Thanks, Morgan.
Of course. Okay, so we move on to dignity of risk, right? And just like Maddie explained in the last question, or you all sort of discovered in the last question, that mistakes are part of the human experience. And I cannot reiterate that enough because it's part of the journey of being a person. It's part of growing up, right? And it's part of gaining independence as a human being, right? Everyone makes mistakes, including people with disabilities. Okay, and I happen to be an individual with a disability myself. I have a physical disability and I have cerebral palsy, and I make mistakes every day, right? So does my mom. So does my dad, right? Everyone makes mistakes. And try as you might, you cannot bubble wrap your loved one with a disability. This point to me is extremely important because you can't bubble wrap your individual with a disability, your loved one, right? You can't send them out into the world with a big thing of bubble wrap around them and try to protect them from every single thing that might come their way, right? It's part of learning, it's part of growing, it's part of the human experience to face obstacles. And individuals with disabilities deserve to take risks and make mistakes. And that's how they grow. It's how we all grow. Just like I explained in the previous point, that is growth, right? Making mistakes, making decisions, making poor decisions, making good decisions. It's how growth happens for everyone. So SDM preserves an individual with a disability's right to make mistakes and take risks. It allows them the freedom. It preserves their ability to be able to make mistakes and take risks and have that part of the human experience be part of their journey as well. And it allows parents and caregivers the opportunity to watch their loved one with a disability spread their wings and thrive. And I know that sounds like kind of a cheesy phrase, but it's true because SDM allows individuals with disabilities to maintain independence, to gain independence in the way that they can. And while SDM is not for everyone, it is truly a great alternative to guardianship, right? It is not for everyone. Sometimes when a client comes to me and inquires about SDM, we kind of go through the questionnaire, we go through certain activities, and I have to determine that maybe that's not the greatest alternative to guardianship for them, but it can be a great alternative to guardianship for others. So why do we use supported decision making, right? It helps build and maintain independence. And I kind of alluded to this on the last slide, but it really does. It allows the individual the ability to make decisions and to participate in the decision-making process. And it allows individuals with disabilities to grow as people and make their own choices, right? Maybe with a little bit of support, but still they're making their own choices at the end of the day. It prevents abuse, right? Often in guardianship cases, sometimes we see abuse. And so SDM sort of prevents this abuse from occurring. It also allows individuals with disabilities to preserve their rights, right? Because with SDM, and I want to sort of expand on this point for a second, with SDM, you're not giving up your rights. You're just, you're preserving your rights and you're allowing people to help you make decisions, but you're not giving up your rights. It increases confidence for individuals with disabilities, and I think that's kind of obvious. And it increases education and employment opportunities and improves outcomes. Next slide, please. Okay, so how do we use it, right? We know what it is, why we use it, how do we use it now, right? So SDM can be used as a written formal agreement or a more informal verbal agreement. Now, I will say that every client that I've had that we've drafted a supported decision-making agreement for, it's been that written formal agreement. But it can be more informal and be a verbal agreement as well. So supporters can meet with decision makers as often as the decision maker would like to discuss the decisions they need to make. That could be weekly, it could be monthly, it could be once a year, it could be every 6 months, right? But it's really up to the decision maker how often they want to meet with their supporters. So an SDM agreement can be used in combination with a healthcare proxy for medical decisions or even a power of attorney document. And I'm going to pause here for just a second. So the way I like to think of these SDM agreements is sort of a package, right? So we can add the healthcare surrogate document or a power of attorney to the SDM agreement. It doesn't just have to be the SDM agreement alone that you use, right? So, and then, just a second, sorry. SDM agreements look different for everyone, right? So what I like to say is that they are uniquely tailored to each individual with a disability, because just as someone just said in the chat, disabilities are a spectrum, right? So everyone needs something different, and so too, SDM agreements look different for everyone, and that's okay, right? So, next slide, please. Okay, so now I get to the real important part here, although all of it's important, but this is super important. Florida's SDM law, which was passed in 2024, as I previously said, and was supported by self-advocates. It's located in section 709.2209 of the Florida statutes, and it actually falls under the power of attorney statutes. So it differs from a standard POA, and I want to pause here again to kind of explain why. Because in a power of attorney situation, when you draft a power of attorney, what you're doing is you're allowing a person, right, the agent in legal speak, to make certain decisions for you, right? But with SDM, you are constantly part of the decision-making process. So that person, your supporter, is not making decisions for you, they're just helping you make those decisions. It's very, very different. Next slide, please. Okay. So, key features of Florida's law, right? It ensures that courts are aware of SDM. And this is very important because up until now, until the time when the SDM law was put into practice and signed in the state of Florida, a lot of courts didn't really feel like they had to recognize it. But now, because it is a legal document for all intents and purposes, it ensures that courts are aware of SDM. So now we can go to a court and say, well, my child has an SDM agreement or my adult child, I should say, because you can only have it when, if you're 18 or over. My adult child has an SDM agreement, please recognize this. And now they kind of have to, right? So the other important feature is that there is a notarization requirement. And I do explain this to every single one of my clients at the end of the process. So basically what you have to do is go to a bank, go to a notary, get it notarized in order to use it. And then it will become effective. It can be revoked in writing at any time, right? So if at any time you say, I don't want to do this SDM thing anymore, I'm done, or I don't think this is the best alternative for me, then it can be revoked, and that's perfectly okay. It also includes protections for the decision maker, right? There's like a little clause at the end of the supported decision making agreement that talks about reporting, abuse, neglect, exploitation to the abuse hotline, and it allows individuals with disabilities to, in terms of protections, it allows them to make their own decisions, and for those decisions, the ability to make those decisions to be legally recognized. So let's get more into protections for decision makers, right? So in section 825.103 of the Florida statutes, we deal with exploitation of the elderly or disabled persons, and my goodness, I'm sorry if you can hear that. I'm getting a call. And in and SDM is also mentioned in section 709.2114 of the Florida statutes, where we recognize that the supporter is a fiduciary, right? They're acting on behalf and in the best interest of the individual with a disability, and so therefore the supporter cannot act against the decision maker's best interest, right? And so that's why it's really important to have that supporter be someone that you can trust. And third parties must accept or reject the agreement within a reasonable time. So think about it like this. Think about courts of law, right? Doctors' offices, therapy clinics, things of that nature where your individual with a disability, your decision maker, is going to have to make some decisions. And so they must accept or reject the agreement within a reasonable time. And if someone refuses to accept the SDM agreement, they must explain to you why in writing, right? So they can't just say, no, we're not going to accept it. They have to explain why in writing. Next slide, please. Okay. So one final reminder, right? And I lied, this may be my favorite slide. It is perfectly okay to ask for all the help you need to make decisions. That's fine. It is perfectly okay, right? We all ask for help at times. We wouldn't be human if we didn't. And it's important that each SDM agreement is, like I said, uniquely tailored to the individual it is created for. So every SDM agreement is going to look different. And that's to be expected because not every single person is the same, right? We're all different. And so our SDM agreements are going to look different.
Thank you so much, Morgan. This is Maddie speaking, and I am so excited to move into the next part of our presentation where we're going to hear from Carla and Yolanda about their experience with supported decision making. So I'll have Yolanda and Carla come off mute and on video, and we will get started with some questions.
I don't think good morning. I don't believe the video is on.
The videos, we can see you and hear you great, so we can go ahead and get started with our questions.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, on behalf of Carla and myself, I just want to thank all of you for this opportunity to show off actually a decision that it took us forever to come to terms with until supported decision making came about. And a disclaimer, just as we're learning how to present choices to Carla, this morning she decided that this is not for her today. She may show up here next to my chair, next to us and sit in our chair. But I apologize for her being in and out of the video. All right. So having said that, is there any? Yep, I'm ready.
All right, sounds good. And yes, it's all good with Carla coming in and out. And we're happy as you're present, and if Carla comes in, that's great too. So our first question for you is, why did you choose supported decision making?
Carla and I attended a presentation, our local family care council, where Disability Rights Florida was talking about supported decision making. Now, mind you, my Carla is today, she's 40 years old. So this happened about 4 years ago. We had not seek the other options because Carla has worked very hard to get to a point where she was a productive citizen, just as we were trained back in early 2000 years, 2001, 2, and 3, about being a participant in the community, the ability to get a job, go to college, and all those great opportunities. When I turned around, I looked at I have heard all about the other options, and supported decision making was not in the horizon back in the day. Again, when we heard about supported decision making and during this family care council meeting, it was the light went on. That's what we have been waiting for, Carla. And immediately we joined the support group and learned all about it and started working on building a team that would be helpful beyond my husband and my years. And luckily for all of us, she has an incredible family support, 4 brothers, 2 brothers and 2 sisters. So those were the first ones that came on board. And then we have therapists that have assisted Carla through the years on her behavior issues and how to conduct her business and continue working with her cookies and learning and progressing and perfecting some of her recipes. So that was an incredible time. In October of 2021, we finally finished all the process and were able to sign and notarize her packet.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for telling us a bit about how you got to using SDM and getting your package and the agreement set up to be successful for Carla. Have you ever had any issues using the SDM agreement, and has anyone ever refused to accept it?
The most we have been very fortunate actually. The recently Carla had to have a minor medical procedure. As we go and register her, of course they're going to ask when they see that she's not able to communicate verbally, and when I speak with her, she's got to answer through the communication device. This is just she uses this laptop. No, not laptop. Mini mini device, and she expresses her yes and no questions and can go into a little more detail. When upon realization that Carla was not probably had a cognitive disability, they went on to request guardianship paperwork, and the only thing that I needed to show was the designation of healthcare surrogate. And once they read it, made their copies, one of the two supporters were present at that time. And no, that was it. They read it, made copies, and off we went to have her procedure done. No problem at all.
Yeah, that's a great example of maybe just a couple extra steps in communication with either a medical office or another service provider that, you've had to do maybe a little bit of educating about what SDM might be and how it works for Carla and how she can, communicate and get her message across with the healthcare surrogate, support from you and from her family. In addition to like a medical procedure, what other choices has Carla been able to make?
Very important at the bank. We had to open up, recently, we had to open up bank accounts for her Social Security benefits. We needed to make some changes. And one of we have a financial, legal and financial designation too, included in the packet that we needed to have ready. And also, through her communication device, we were able to give her the option to say, you want to open we need to use very simple words. The question posed to Carla was, do you want mom to help you? Or do you want your sister to help you open up your account? She pressed her sister, and that's enough for her. Her sister was able to speak on behalf of Carla, and from time to time, if a question was relevant and simple enough, she would have the opportunity to say yes or no. That is a combination. Believe it or not, all of us are also helping, and all of us are learning how to include Carla as in every step of life. In the past, it was a lot simpler to come along with Carla and answer questions in any setting. Just she would be quietly sitting next to us, and we would do all the talking, including going to a checkup. Now she's able to say, I kind of coach when we go to primary doctor. Uh, I ask them to ask Carla, we're going to get your weight. Can I help you get on the scale? She needs to say yes or no. Sometimes she says no. Actually, many times she says no. So the person does step back. I very quietly ask again, step on the scale. And then Carla has to say, okay, there she goes. As I said, simple words of communication has also helped us to include Carla in every step of the life, of her daily life.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think, what you're saying, and what a great theme of your supported decision-making agreement, and like the support for Carla, is the ability to make these smaller choices, but these smaller choices build into her decision-making skills and her confidence to make decisions. So that's really the beauty of supported decision-making. You're really quite literally supporting someone to make confident decisions and feel confident in themselves to choose what they want, like the ability to say yes or no or okay to a doctor assisting or performing a procedure or what have you. I do have one question based on something that someone put in the chat, and you reference like the packet of the paperwork or information that you use for Carla's supported decision-making agreement. Could you touch on what you refer to as the packet, and what things are included in that?
Well, first of all, I think that every aspect of her daily life has a document that indicates obligations and needs and requirements, and for this particular issue. We start with the supported decision making agreement that gives permission to her supporters to intercede on her behalf or work in tandem with her. Another one is the legal and financial durable power of attorney for Carla. And again, it describes how the level of representation that entitles the supporter in tandem with Carla to speak on her behalf or to advise her, and so Carla can answer yes or no questions, a very simple one. Yes, come on. Yeah. And this is Carla. Okay. Now the next one we have for education, a school in program durable power of attorney for Carla. That's just I don't need to tell you what it is entitled. And then we have the health care durable power of attorney on behalf of Carla, and most importantly too, a designation for healthcare surrogate for Carla. And I think last but not least, we have the FERPA. I just have the FERPA, and that is also for the protection of her communication, what we can and cannot share. I believe that's if I'm saying this correctly, and that's it. That's the packet. We should call. It should. I just use that word for being a lot easier to explain all the content of it. Now each section as I mentioned, describes in detail what the supporters are able to do for Carla. And it does cover in eventualities where for her protection at all times. That's what we really liked about this supported decision making. That it says in detail, describes in detail the obligations and the what the supporter is willing to do by signing that and have it notarized. It really brings it to a bigger level. In this gives us the confidence and the peace of mind to indicate that Carla has an incredible supported group, that it is there for her and will be there for her beyond the parents' years, our minds and husband's years. And we have enough time to continue training them and getting them involved. So that's what the packet includes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for explaining that and sharing more about what's all included in Carla's supported decision-making agreement and related documents. We have a bunch of questions in our chat and our Q&A. So I'm going to ask a few of them. Some will be specifically for Morgan, some may be specifically for Yolanda and Carla, or some may be answered by both of you. So we can go ahead and I will pull those up. There is a kind of broad question of how do you do this with the court system? Do you need to show the paperwork to the courts? Do you have to get the paperwork approved by the courts? Like, Morgan, could you speak a little bit to what that process might be like and what the court's involvement or lack thereof is?
Sure. So this is all new. I would like to kind of back up real quick and just say that it only came into effect on July 1st, right? So this is a new process. It's a new it's a new legal document, if you will. So people have been using it as a non-legal document, for some time now. But as far as the court system is concerned, I mean, as far as we know, and obviously we're keeping tabs on the developments with this and how it evolves. But as far as we know, if you feel that you need to use SDM in a court setting, that is something that then you would go and present to the court. But if you want to use it, say at a doctor's office, or you want to use it at school, or you don't have to go to the court and present it to the court in order to do that. All you have to do is get it notarized and witnessed by two people to get it signed, notarized, and then you can go ahead and use it and place it on file with as many organizations, institutions as you'd like.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And thanks for clearing that up. Another couple of questions that I'd love to have you kind of address is, how do people get started if they're interested in SDM, either like as a parent or a loved one? How can they start this process to help a family member or a friend? Or if they're a person with a disability, what next steps should they take and who should be getting involved?
Sure. Okay, so this is a sort of a shameless plug, if you will. But you would call our intake line and explain to them that you are interested in supported decision making. You can even explain to them that you attended this webinar and learn more about it. You'd like to kind of explore what's available, and if they they'll potentially send your case on for review. It's not a guarantee of assistance, but typically if they do send it on for review and we accept it, it'll most likely go to me because, like I said, I'm the person on at DRF who mainly does supported decision making cases. And then we will go ahead and we will start to kind of explore what we'll have an initial call. We'll explore kind of what your SDM agreement may include. I'll ask you some questions. We'll go through the types of decisions you'd like to receive help making. I guess this is from the point of the view of a view of the individual with the disability, but and then we will go ahead and we will start to draft the actual agreement. And the actual agreement, I believe, is I can't always remember. I do with these all the time, and I can't always remember if it's 13 or 17 pages. I believe it's 17 pages, and so we typically do it in one session. And we'll go ahead and I'll read the agreement from top to bottom. We'll go in, we'll fill it in, and we'll do the other supporting documents if need be in subsequent appointments. So the healthcare surrogate, the power of attorney, and the like.
Great.
If I may interject for a little bit.
Yes, yeah, of course.
Once the process that you just described, once we knew what we needed to include on all of the duties that supporters will have, then both my husband and I started to build a team, and that include asking her brothers and sisters if they would be willing to carry on and explain and educated them what the process was going to be in this regard. Because we thought it was important for us to also give them the opportunity to either get involved or not. We always based our values into respect, and we didn't want to take this as for granted. You're going to have to do that. They had the option to do that. The older brother and sisters were the first ones that came in really without any hesitation, and followed by the two in the middle, the two younger ones. But again, then we also started to the same conversation with some of her therapists that are been there for Carla, that know her, and including the support coordinator. And we went as far back as the first support coordinator that came into Carla's life, who retired at some point. So that built a bigger group of supporters. We did have an incredible signing ceremony in our home. We made it a meal. It was just very festive. And we continue to be in touch with those who are going to support Carla at some point in the future. We continue to keep them involved and keep them abreast of what's happening in Carla's life. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. A couple of questions are asking, how do you determine if SDM is right for you or your adult child or a loved one? Is there certain testing that needs to be done? Is there certain things that you could recommend?
So I will go ahead and answer that, Maddie. So no specific testing needs to be done. Typically the way I like to approach this when we have that initial call is I go through several different documents, right, that have been developed by different organizations to kind of explore if SDM is right. And if so, what needs to be in the agreement? So we go through sort of a checklist, and I ask the individual with a disability questions, and if they want the family involved as well, we go through kind of a list of questions, and I say, okay, can you do this with support or without support, or do you need someone to do it for you? So we go through that list of questions. We decide if SDM is right for the individual, and I'd like to bring up that just because an individual is nonverbal doesn't mean they can't use SDM. So we have various different forms of SDM agreements. I did see a question in the chat about a template. And we do have a template that contains pictures. So if that is the way that the individual would prefer to communicate, if that's best for them, then we can use that as well. It's not one specific agreement that must be used that's recognized by law. And so therefore, yeah, we kind of go through and determine if the individual is would benefit from SDM, but no specific psychological testing or anything like that needs to be done. Although those things may inform whether you as the parent or individual yourself believe that it could benefit you or your loved one.
And may I share the process of our decision?
Yes.
Carla worked very diligently, and we pushed her hard, just as we did the other children while she was in school. One of her bigger talents is her willingness to keep up the tempo, keep up the pace. During the school years, we were always pushing for communication, and we succeeded to a degree. But then the option, when she turned 18, we realized that in order to get guardianship, she would have to give up all of her rights. And we were never, my husband and I were never comfortable with declaring her incompetent because she worked so hard in school. She liked to be outdoors. She enjoys sports, all kinds of outside life, just as we were educated back in those days as parents to raise children with disabilities into the community. Then came about, that was plenary guardianship. The second option was the guardian advocate. That gave them the right, if I'm not mistaken, to vote and get married. That was, again, very limited to Carla. We didn't know about the future, what the future is going to lay for her, but just giving her those two rights, then the rest of it would disappear. So that's what kept us from choosing those early options in her early years. And when the supported decision making was brought on to us, that was to us the perfect fit. Even though she is not able to communicate as we all do verbally on the communication device, she does have the ability to participate, to make decisions, to answer yes and no questions, and to laugh, and she's funny. She makes some funny things that bring people joy too. So that process, the personal process from her family, mom and dad, was paramount until not choosing the other two options and waited out until something better came up. And what better choice for us than the supported decision making.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I hope you can see there's a lot of heart reactions being floated on the screen. And if you can't see that, I just want you to know that a lot of people are appreciative and grateful for your story that you're sharing. I wanted to ask one quick and final question. And again, this one is for Morgan, and I do want to note that it's 11:56. So this will be our final question, and we have to answer it fairly quickly so we can show our resources and final slides. Morgan, if someone has a guardianship but has decided that maybe this isn't the right option for me or my my child or friend, is there a process, or what is the process to explore other options like supported decision making to be less restrictive?
Yeah, and I'm going to try to answer this fairly quickly because I know we're running out of time. But so SDM can actually coexist with guardianship. Okay, and so there's a place on the document that talks about, I believe it's section 11 of the SDM agreement that talks about coexisting with a guardianship and the guardian signature. But only the guardian signature is only required if the SDM agreement touches on the rights that have been removed from the individual. But if you feel that guardianship is not a viable option for you anymore, or you don't want it, there's always unwinding, which which takes a while, and restoration of rights always takes quite some time. I know we've done some in the past. I haven't done one as of yet, but yeah. So you can either unwind or it can coexist. It really just depends on your specific situation and all. So
Great. Thank you for answering that. So I want to thank Carla and Yolanda and Morgan for presenting and speaking to everyone today. I want to share and highlight a couple of the recent chats in the webinar chat. There's a link to DRF's SDM resources. And when you click that link, all of the resources that are shown on this page, like what is supported decision making, various tools, some success stories, etc., will be available on that page. So I know you can't click on this screen right now, but those resources will be available on our website. Last but not least, keep up with Disability Rights Florida on our social media. We share supported decision-making updates. We were posting a bunch about the law being passed earlier this summer. We share resources and stories related to SDM on our social media, so be sure to follow us for information and news related to disability. And then lastly, in the chat, we posted a link to our post-webinar survey. If you have a smartphone, you can also go on the camera and take a scan of the QR code that's on the right side of the screen. And you'll take a brief survey about this presentation. And you'll need to use the presentation code ZW4 in order to access that survey. So I just want to say thank you so much again for everybody who came out today. Remember, this will be recorded and available on our YouTube and website very soon. So thank you so much, and everybody have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.